Yeah, so there's various different reasons for that. Firstly, I'm going to be rude, is that even Christians that actually know their Bible well tend to read what they believe instead of believe what they read. So consequently, they'll always quote the same scriptures. Jesus says, my kingdom is not of this earth, and therefore we are not of this earth. And it's like, well, you pay your taxes, right? If there's a crime committed, you'll phone the police, right? You do realize in Romans chapter 13, it talks about that God has given us civil magistrates, i.e. government, to rule the affairs of men. We're a part of all that. And to say that as Christians, we don't want to be involved in civil magistrates when God has ordained that, where we have a place, a mandate, let your kingdom come be done and let your will be done on earth as it is being done in heaven. So this whole thing of like, I'm of a realm that's not of this realm, it's just nonsense. And but Jesus says, render unto God that which is God, render unto Caesar that which is Caesar. It's like, no, what he's saying is God is supreme and God is king, but you still have got to do things in respect to your civic responsibility. So the Bible teaches that clearly. Also in Daniel chapter 4, it's very clear that God raises up whom he will for his plans and purposes. So to say that God isn't political and that Christians shouldn't be political, with respect, shows a complete biblical ignorance of what scriptures actually teach. And the reason why that's so is because many Christians today are Marcionites. What's a Marcionite? Marcion is a guy there from the early church history who was a heretic. He basically saw the Old Testament as bad, and that God is a bad God, and then the God of the New Testament is a nice God. And so consequently, we see that still evident now, where people just don't read their Old Testament because it's not relevant. But of course, then they see everything through the lens of church, but not through the lens of kingdom. God has always dealt with nations. God has always dealt with kingdoms. And that's another thing. People don't think that nations matter. Yet in the book of Revelation, it talks about at the very end, it talks about the glory of the nations coming into the New Jerusalem. The tree of life is there for the healing of the nations. In Matthew 25, it talks about separating of the sheep and the goats, which is the nations being separated at the end of days on how they treated Israel. All of these things. And so, but Christians, they just don't see it because they're reading what they believe and not believing what they read. And so this is one of the problems that I'm finding. That's at the nicer end of the spectrum. At the worst end of the spectrum, you've got Christians who are just blatantly politicized themselves to a left-wing agenda or are, forgive me for saying, just cowards. If I just put it bluntly.